Um, what we've heard is a whole bunch of broad things about STEM. You know, here are some really important big ideas about STEM. And what you're going to hear in a few minutes are some other very important things about what's going on in the classroom. And so what I'm going to try to do is give a very brief bridge from those big ideas and what learning studios are to what's actually happening. What is a learning studio? Because that's one of the questions that we get asked all the time is, what is a learning studio? And it's a very difficult question to answer at one level because I'll tell you what we're not. We're not a curriculum. We're not an organization that comes in with a package and we say, here is your learning studio. Do this and you're a learning studio. What we're really about is a process, a collaborative process that brings together a whole bunch of people and tries to change the way they go about teaching in their classroom. And so learning studios look different in each school that we go into. As the teachers take control of the process, as the scientists and engineers come in from outside and contribute to the process, and as the students take ownership of their learning and decide what it is they want to do. So there is no single learning studio in that I can point to and say, this is a learning studio. What I can do is go through the process. Here's how we make learning studios happen. Here's how we can help teachers work with scientists so that students can take control of their learning and engage in these STEM investigations. So I made a whole bunch of slides. I made a few slides that are much more complicated than they needed to be, given that we seem to be the extreme range of the clicker. So we'll see how it goes. Stop there. All right. Learning studios, the process is based on a series of investigations that NCTAF has done over the course of its history, looking into learning communities, collaborative learning processes. And we summarized this in a document that we released back in June 2010 called Team Up for 21st Century Teaching and Learning, where we summarize the best practices essentially in collaborative teaching. And what we found were there's 6 principles that underlie really effective collaborative teaching. And those 6 principles are these right here: shared values and goals, collective responsibility. The group has a collective responsibility for what for that goal they're going to accomplish. They have time for self-directed reflection, authentic assessment, stable settings, and yes, the 6th one, strong leadership support. So these are the 6 goals. And what we do in learning studios is create an environment where we try to address all 6 of these goals. So those are the learning challenge are the activities, the project guidance that the teachers create for the students. That's the shared goal of the group. Collective responsibility, that comes about from the joint planning process that the teachers engage in along with the scientist. Self-directed reflection, there's a time for formative evaluation both by the teachers for what the students are working on, but also we provide time for teachers to reflect within their planning process on what they've done and what they could do better. Authentic assessment, again, that joint planning and assessment time doing there. Stable settings. One of the key, I was playing golf with somebody the other day who's actually a consultant, a business consultant. And we got to talking and we decided that we're really in the same line of business. And that is, there are an awful lot of things that businesses can do that they have the capability of doing, but they just won't do them until an outside consultant comes in and sort of provides that focus on getting it done. And really at NCTAF, with learning studios, that's one of the things that we do. I think a lot of school districts have sort of the innate capacity to undertake learning studios themselves, but other things get in the way. And it ceases to be priority. And I had some discussions with a couple school districts about this just a couple weeks ago. It's always, when it's a self-directed process within the school district, you always have the emergencies come up and the initiative gets pushed aside. We come in 7 days a year and it's on the schedule and we don't get pushed aside. So learning studios remain high priority in the district. They remain a focus and they get carried through. And this happens, you know, in many, many situations. So stable settings, we provide that. And then strong leadership support, partly us, largely the administration, and largely then within the team. So next, conceptually, what are learning studios? Well, learning studios focus on student achievement, which is basically, I like John's slide with the complicated one with everything propellering in and stuff. But if we take that slide and summarize it as student achievement, and John outlined many of the different parts of student achievement there, we address student achievement from 3 different directions. Project-based learning. But project-based learning alone is not learning studios. Interdisciplinary collaboration, but interdisciplinary collaboration alone is not learning studios. And outside content experts. And again, we've all used outside content experts in our classrooms, but they're not learning studios. It's this mixture, the process of bringing together all 3 of these that makes learning studios happen. With project-based learning, there are many different approaches to project-based learning. Buck Institute, Intel has summarized some, many others. We don't adopt any one process. We sort of borrow from many of these different processes. And we try to encourage the teachers to learn about the project-based learning process and incorporate these skills in their own teaching and to utilize the resources that they find comfortable. For interdisciplinary collaboration, click 4 times now. We're currently focused on science, math, technology, and engineering, STEM. But there's nothing magical about STEM within Learning Studios. Learning Studios, as a collaborative, interdisciplinary process, can incorporate language arts, social sciences, visual arts, incorporate any of things. We can go STREAM, we can go STEAM, we can go whatever acronym you want to go. Learning Studios really fits that because it just asks people to collaborate across their curriculum and come up with ways that students can see these interdisciplinary connections and work together. Outside content experts, many sources for outside content experts. We've heard from some of them today. Excuse me. Active STEM employees, retirees, university faculty, all of these people. All of these things on the outside are not learning studios. They all contribute to learning studios. Learning studios is the process of how we bring these 3 key things together to affect student achievement. So the next slide is an attempt to give you sort of a structural view of learning studios. What are the actual pieces of learning studios? So in this view, at the core is the team. 5 or 6 teachers, typically 1 or 2 science teachers, 1 or 2 math teachers, a technology teacher, and then the team gets filled out in the different schools depending on the different goals of the schools. So we've seen English teachers on teams, psychology teachers on teams, history teachers on teams, special ed teachers on teams. So that's the core, alongside this outside scientist or engineer who's contributing to the team as well. These teachers create, for each quarter, a learning challenge, a focus for their students. This is not necessarily an activity. It's not a lesson plan. It's not something that's delivered directly to the students. It's intended to be a framework from within which the students can choose a project to work on. Now, the reality is, when we go into a new school district, there may be anywhere along this continuum of being ready to do project-based learning right now to what's project-based learning. So we may go into a school district and these first few learning challenges may look very traditional. They may not be very much like project-based learning. But over the time that we collaborate, we move the teachers towards the project-based learning process that we want them to do. So the learning challenges then are presented to the students. Students generate work out of that. Students demonstrate their skills and abilities. And this is all supported by our business partners, NCTAF staff, district staff. So that's sort of the structure of what happens. What we're going to have here soon are some people from these different areas talk to you about what they've done in their classrooms and as outside scientists and as district administrators to make this process happen. Finally, what does this look like in terms of the timeline of events through the course of the year? We start in the summer with 3 days of professional development, if you will, with the teachers. Day 1 is very traditional professional development sort of day. Laura Coscarelli and I spend a lot of time pushing information out to the teachers. Here's what project-based learning looks like. Here's some resources you could use to get your students started on project-based learning. Here are some ideas for selecting themes or areas of investigation for your students. So that first day is very traditional project professional development, but we end it with something that's fairly non-traditional. And we end it with the teachers sharing with each other what it is in their curriculum that they find a struggle to communicate to their students. So the math teacher says, these are things I'm fighting in my classroom. The science teacher says, here are the things I'm trying to address in my classroom. And they share these across the curriculum. And what we find, what we encourage them to find, are connections between these things so that they can build on these and help each other out with these problems. On the second day, that's when we want to bring that outside content expert in. And they start the conversation, we hope, with those problems they identified the day before. Here's what we're trying to accomplish in our classroom. Here are the types of things we're doing. And the content expert comes in and says, here are the things I'm doing in my workplace. Now, how can we bring these together? What are the connections between what's going on in the workplace and what's going on in the classroom? That's where the magic occurs. Okay? That's where the conversation really starts to get interesting. How can teachers shape student investigations so that students can see the career connections, they can see the importance of the real world problems that they're working on, and the like. And then day 3 of the summer session is for the teachers to really start to expand that out. What would this look like in terms of some activities for the students to engage in? What are some areas that we could open up for students to create research questions and that sort of thing? We then come back in each one of the academic quarters and have a one-day session with the teachers where they hone, they create the specific activities or the specific guidance that they'll take to their classroom. The scientists may or may not be present at those quarterly activities. Okay? We hope they are, but there may be times when the teachers don't really need that presence. They really need time to get that specific academic coursework created.